Welcome back to Module 2 of the Office 365 Fundamentals course. My name is Alistair Spears.
And I'm Jeff Medford.
So we're here today to talk about Office 365 for IT professionals. In this course, we're going to talk a little bit more about behind the scenes of Office 365, how we architect Office 365, how all the different workloads and services hang together, and some of the operational processes that we do at Microsoft to make sure that Office 365 is always up to date and always available for you as a customer of Office 365. So the agenda that we have here today is essentially to talk about our global cloud infrastructure, the logical architecture of Office 365. We'll talk about some of the workloads behind the scenes and how we architect those workloads specifically. And then we'll talk about service operations, how we manage the service and keep it up and running for you. So the cloud. The cloud is a magical thing, Jeff.
Yes, it is. It is. Everyone knows about it, right?
Yeah, the cloud. I love when I hear people that may be less technical kind of stare up at the sky like the cloud was some orbiting space station or something like that.
Yes.
But the cloud has gone for this kind of niche technology that was all hype to something that's just part of our everyday lives now. We use it in social networking. We use it without thinking in email. It's also controlling the giant robots on your Xbox
That's
these
right.
days with
That's
Titanfall and those sorts of things. So it is kind of that thing that's just pervasive through all of the technology that we use today. But when you're talking about enterprise IT, and when we're thinking about kind of the corporate technologies that we have to manage as IT professionals, we need to treat this stuff differently as we treat it as a consumer.
Absolutely. There's different rules and there's different engagement models. And so as IT pros, we need to think about the cloud as how we can help have control, how we can help our end users, and how we can utilize the cloud as a resource, and maybe not as some of the consumer vision of, it's just all around us and my data is everywhere and I don't quite know. I'm signed up for 50 different services. From an IT perspective, we really need to think about how the cloud and our enterprise architecture interacts.
That's right. And so when we think about Office 365, it is not a consumer cloud solution. It is an enterprise-grade cloud solution. And as an IT professional, you should absolutely not treat it as this mysterious black box. It is very different to, say, other technologies. And as an IT professional, it's our value to our organizations to really understand what's going on behind the scenes, understand the technology that we're using, because it's kind of our value. Otherwise, we wouldn't be IT pros, right?
Absolutely. And I think one of the big part of investments from Microsoft is to give IT pros control, to give configurations, to allow you to really have a deep level view of Office 365. So we're definitely not saying treat it like a black box. We're saying we've added the controls, we make the investments, whether it's PowerShell, whether it's admin center controls or message center, that from an IT pro perspective, you can own, control, and really manipulate Office 365 in a way that's beneficial for your business.
Absolutely. So Jeff, take us through some of the global infrastructure that actually runs Office 365 behind the scenes.
Yeah, it starts from a data center perspective, and that magic cloud actually is really big places out on plains or out by rivers or places that geologically we've surveyed and said, hey, this is a spot for a data center. And so all the magic of the cloud happens in very real scenarios with people working, with servers humming in a data center architecture. And on the screen right now, you're seeing basically a representation of that. And we say, and we joke about it a lot with customers, like, well, we have between 10 and 100 data centers for Office 365. So a pretty broad range. We could be in your backyard or not. But what we try to do is focus them on regions. So you have regional standards, backups, primary, places where the data maybe from Exchange or SharePoint are in different locations in a region, but then we don't go outside that region. And I think that's the most important part, that even if we have hundreds of data centers, we keep them regional. We keep our customers focused in on where their business is, where data protection lies. So as we build out that network across the whole world, It starts with those huge data centers, the billions of dollars of investments that we're making, and then starts to move out from there.
And so what would you say to customers that say, hey, I have data centers already. I have 10 data centers, I have 20 data centers. What makes a Microsoft data center different to, say, a customer data center?
These are, between 60 to 100,000 to 400,000 types of servers, and we really don't call it a data center until we are in the hundreds of thousands of servers. So,
so it's the scale.
It's the scale, and it's the services and the way that the architecture that we run, and you'll see that as we go through this module. Kind of the inside look is it's not just that physical location that differs from what our customers might be able to employ. It's the billions in investment.
Right.
It's the fact that we are running extremely large farms or exchange environments for our customers. But it also takes it beyond that, and we go down into the CDN and bringing the Microsoft network as deep as we can and as close to our customers as possible. I think that's another piece from an investment perspective, that our customers can have some peering points. They can have CDN. They can cache. They can bring some of that out to their branch environments. But from a Microsoft perspective, we're talking about a global network, and we're talking about a world-class network that goes from the data center out to the CDN as close as we can to our customers, and then connects them across the world so that wherever you are, and we talk about working anywhere, working at home, whatever it is, that the fewest amount of hops possible until you get on the Microsoft network, where we can help control and have quality on that traffic.
Right. So even though there may not be a data center in your city or your country or your region, there's probably a CDN that you're connecting to that is actually on the Microsoft network and is giving you a really fast connection on that backbone, on that fiber backbone back into the Microsoft data center.
Absolutely. And as we go through and talk about like a specific location, you might think of the US as the region, and we have primary backups, we have data centers all around from a US perspective, and then it goes out to those CDNs, but it doesn't stop there. So you have those core data centers, you have the ability to move, we move data and we move those connection points as deep as we can. And then we start getting into what we call metro solutions or peering points. So we connect into the IP peering networks. Microsoft then drives it deeper so that from a core data center, you have the edge node. From the edge node, you then go into the metro solution. And that's connecting our business customers into our network even deeper.
Right.
And Microsoft has invested heavily in these connections, IP peering points, agreements with providers, so that from a specific ISP, you have the best possible scenario going through. The other piece I wanted to get to is that last mile. And with last mile, it comes actual applications running on your laptop, running on your desktops. And it's the applications and the way that Office is built that allows that maybe point-to-point or peer-to-peer communication. The ability for Lync or the ability for Outlook to cache and understand that it is a desktop application that's running on Windows or running on the Mac and is going to give you a better experience because you can have offline access. You can have quality between those peer-to-peer. Lync Voice is an example. When you connect from a link online to another link online, it doesn't have to travel through that entire network. It actually goes peer-to-peer, and it finds that least cost route between the two.
And I think that's a really important point, because a lot of IT pros kind of think of the cloud as synonymous with the web. And so the browser experience is how you get into the cloud. But the cloud is so much more than just a browser, just that kind of HTTP traffic. And so when you have things like Office apps that are cloud enabled, that are talking to the cloud, you can bring in all of that asynchronous communication. You can take a lot of that kind of noise on the network that maybe because you're traveling or you're moving between Wi-Fi networks or something like that. You can actually smooth over a lot of that with the smart endpoints that we have in Office and the Office apps themselves.
Absolutely, and to take it to the next level, you talk about click to run and you talk about Office and what a lot of our customers and even IT pros don't quite understand what Office is and how we deliver it. And a lot of questions we get is, well, what is the bandwidth it takes? How do I install it? If I have 100,000 employees all trying to install Office, how do I control that? And that's where we give that control back to IT and say, you have the gold image. Even though it's Office 365 Pro Plus, you actually can store that on your own network. You control the updates. And from a network perspective, it becomes a moot point.
Yeah.
And so there's a bunch that we're going to talk about in the deployment scenarios that really help IT pros deliver on, hey, we're getting to the network quickly. We're looking at how we invest in our bandwidth, as that's a part of what a service is, but also features from an application standpoint, from a deployment standpoint, that mean you can control that bandwidth. You can really help your end users have a great experience.
Fantastic. So let's have a think about inside of the data center now and kind of what really is a data center when we're talking at a Microsoft scale. When we think about the data center components, often we just think about the IT components inside a data center, right? It's a bunch of servers, a bunch of technologies. But to our data center engineers, IT is almost like the most trivial part of the system, right? Many times they're not
customer.
really, they're the customer, they're the noisy tenant, right? And the data center engineers are the landlord. And that customer or that tenant really has a couple of requirements. It needs power, it consumes a lot of power, and then it generates a lot of waste in the form of heat. And so it needs a water supply or something like that to take out those heats. And so from a data center engineer point of view, there's all these components that it takes up to just make sure that IT load is as happy as possible. Whether it's the computer room air conditionings, the chillers, condensers, cooling towers, back to a ready water supply, or whether it's the UPS systems, the transformers and generators to make sure that that's a reliable power supply going through. So all of these components are kind of things you need to think about when you're building a really big data center as well. So I want to take you through kind of a couple of pictures of what our data centers actually look like. I think it's one thing to kind of hear about data centers, but I think the pictures really kind of show up some of the great capabilities of the Office 365 data centers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here we're looking at kind of a traditional co-located data center environment. What you can see here, it may look fairly traditional to you, but there are a couple of things that I'll point out that make it very different from, say, a traditional data center that you run in a spare room in your office or something like that. Firstly, you can see the levels of access control we have. This particular pod of servers has its own access control, has its own security system, has its own door, own gated doors down the end of it as well. Then you can see every rack. Every rack is locked and keyed and marked as well. And then, of course, every server is marked, and all of this stuff is tracked. All the access control is tracked as people go into these servers if they need to do anything on site itself. You can see at the top the fiber backbones that are running to all of these servers. These servers have a huge bandwidth requirement, so making sure that all of this stuff is connected and running fast is really important as well. I've been to a couple of these data centers, and one of the things that always amazes me as an IT pro and someone that used to fiddle around with servers was that they had the neatest cabling I'd ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Standards of cabling.
Exactly. There's manuals of cabling, of which colors go where, how to bind it, and those sorts of things. And it's just one of those levels of details that you have to have when you're running hundreds of thousands of servers. Like when you have something that's miscabled or something like that, it just adds that little bit of extra complexity and adds that little bit of extra, kind of what we call configuration drift, that changes the system just that little bit, that when something goes wrong, it makes it even harder to look at as well. Here's a picture of some of the air handling units in that kind of traditional data center. And these things, even these things are modular as well. And you can see here the modular units that we use for the air handling and cooling units here. They can very easily be swapped out, pulled out, replaced if something goes wrong as well. Rather than try to fix the unit on site, it's better off to just replace it altogether and fix it with someone that actually has the expertise. And when you can do that, when it's not a mission critical system anymore, because you have redundancy in those systems, you can fail over, you can keep running without worrying about anything. So that's kind of a traditional look at data centers running at a Microsoft Cloud scale. We also have some more kind of innovative, non-traditional sort of data centers as well. And this is a picture of one of them out at our Quincy data center. Quincy is in eastern Washington. It's the part of Washington State where Seattle is, that is dry and sunny, unlike Redmond, where we're from.
Yep.
This is a great conditions for data centers, whereas I think Redmond's are better conditions for software development.
That's right.
It's always raining and indoors.
Dark, black lights.
That's right. A lot of coffee.
Yep.
But what you can see here is this IT pack, and the IT pack is kind of Microsoft speak for the IT pre-assembled components. And what you can see, it just fits together like Lego here. You see that core IT load there that has about a capacity of 4,000 servers. And you can see in this particular picture, we're lowering in an air handling unit on top.
So you talked earlier about the IT load and all of the other pieces, that the IT load is just one piece.
Yeah.
This is the IT load, right?
That's right,
And when you think of what our data centers really look like, it's electrical engineers, it's facilities type of people that simply take that IT load and then implement it within this next generation data center.
That's right. And in terms of running the IT load, that's all done remotely, right? It's done by the Exchange team for Exchange Online. It's done by SharePoint team for SharePoint Online, or Link for Link Online. We don't need to have the data center engineers understand that. They just need to know that, well, let's just keep this thing powered and keep this thing cool and keep it running. And then remotely, we can manage the rest of the things, even down to like hard toggling the power of a particular server over IP or something like that. So in terms of this, you can see as we lower on that unit, and we just stack them all together. And stacking them all together, we kind of end up with a complete outdoor data center. And you can see here, we have some air filtration units on the front. We have air handling units lowered on the top, and then that core IT load there. And the idea behind this system is it's completely self-contained. So it doesn't need to use electricity to run some of those cooling systems and those sorts of things. It's all using abatic cooling. Essentially, the air is flowing through the data center. The servers are naturally sucking through that air. And as the air is heated up, it gets pulled out of the top. And so just pulling out the air out of the top has that airflow going through the data center and keeping it cool without having to use any power other than to operate the monitoring technologies or opening the vents to control the temperature and those sorts of things as well. So it's a really efficient way of doing it. And now we're getting to the point now that we're actually building data centers built for servers rather than trying to retrofit office buildings into server rooms and data centers. And people have a very different expectation of environment than servers do. And so this is kind of fit for purpose way of building a data center as well.
I think that's always a point that gets some laughs when we talk to customers because they picture themselves on the 8th floor of whatever building they're on, trying to redo the entire floor, do the raised flooring when it was built for people, cubicles,
that's right.
And all the heating and everything else. It really is a different story.
We've heard from many organizations that are moving to Office 365 primarily because they're server room can't take any more weight. Like, it's in danger of collapsing the building and collapsing the floor full of people underneath it. And so there's a whole bunch of different reasons that people are moving to Office 365. And we can take care of this at a much better scale in our systems as well. So the key point of all that is that really that Office 365 infrastructure operates as a separate data center within a data center, kind of an inception type data center, if you like. There's shared mechanical and electrical. There's that shared global fiber network and the peering arrangements that Office 365 benefits from. But then, of course, there's a separate internal network. There's separate hardware and separate storage from our consumer systems, separate encryption procedures, separate compliance policies, and separate access control that make up Office 365. So you're really getting the benefits of all the scale that Microsoft has, combined with a separate enterprise IT environment, which is highly controlled and highly secure as well. So with that, let's kind of transition now and talk a little bit more about the logical architecture behind Office 365. And we think about Office 365 as one service, but really it's not just one cloud service. It's kind of a set of cohesive services that make up for it as well.
And I think that, typically what we position as Office 365, sometimes customers ask us, well, it's Office, right? And it kind of starts with that. That's the brand. That's where we are. But that's really that top line application scenario. So when you think of user productivity applications, it starts with Office. That starts with what we continually envision and continue to move forward with. And then as we build down the layers, you'll see how the server servers become services. The platforms have to then expand to fit all of these pieces. But it starts with Office and the experience that a user truly has with Office.
And that's what they see every day. It's Office, or it's Project and Visio, or it's Office Mobile on their tablet or their phone. Or if it's Office Online, it's Office using the web applications in Office Online. So you're just using it directly through the browser. But built on top of those kind of user productivity applications is also the organizational productivity services that we use as well, and that you may already have on premises. Things like Exchange, SharePoint, Lync, Yammer. All these things are not so much apps built for one user, but they're tools to collaborate, to communicate, and to share all this content as well. And so many organizations, and as IT pros, we're familiar with these tools. We know Exchange, we know SharePoint, we know Lync, we know Yammer. But what we're getting with Office 365 is everything together in that scenario as well.
And I think that's a big point, because for the last 5 or 6 years, as I've worked with IT pros, it's very simple to say, well, we have an Exchange server. Why don't we move that to Office 365? We have SharePoint. Why don't we move that? And so it's very simple to think of it as that services platform, but then it is all those other cohesive pieces that really make it Office 365. And even now, questions come when I talk to IT pros of, how do we get Office 365 on premises? And it always brings a smile to my face, but I try to explain this slide to them and say, Office 365 isn't just the latest of Exchange 2013, SharePoint 2013, but it's everything you're about to talk about, which brings all of these pieces together so that you have that single management, you have that single commerce platform. So that's a big part of the IT pro thought process of what is actually moving to the cloud and what are some of the value add when you think it from an all-up service.
That's right. Because those user productivity applications, the organizational productivity services, by and large, you can get them on premises. You can set them up and manage them yourself. But you just can't manage them as economically as you can Office 365. The things where Office 365 really starts to differentiate itself is around some of these shared platform services as well. Provisioning, update automation, identity management, access control capabilities, system monitoring, what we call the commerce platform, the ability to add new services very easily, control users, license users for the different capabilities, and segment your users out so that you don't need to give every user Project in Visio or even every user Office or something like that. You may want to have some users that are just email, and you may have other users that are just SharePoint, and you may have some users that have all you can eat. They have everything, all the capabilities available to them as well. So we can segment all that stuff out through the shared platform services really quickly as well.
And I think it goes back to the previous module when you talk about lead and build and what does it take, and thinking about Office 365, this is all built. And not only is it built and running with customers on board, but we've built those admin scenarios, we've built those security scenarios, we've built the automation things in so that from a lead time perspective, or when you're looking at Office 365 versus building something on premises, it's already there and it's waiting for you. And
that's right.
And that's a big part. It's built and it's running. So it's really about starting to consume that service.
Absolutely. So then the final set of services I'll talk about are really this idea of streamlined management services as well. And this is kind of interesting because they're not all sort of technical services. Now we're starting to get into kind of the operational components of Office 365, the things that really differentiate Office 365 from an on-premises services. And one of the kind of most important ones in terms of management services is that engineers are on call. The people running Office 365 are the people building the products. It's a very strong DevOps model in that kind of a scenario. You have the Exchange team responsible for Exchange Online. If there's a problem with Exchange Online, we take the Exchange team off working on the new stuff to go and fix that problem online. We wake them up at 3 a.m. We wake them up at 5 a.m. Likewise with SharePoint. If there's a problem with SharePoint or a problem with a SharePoint component, it's the developer responsible for writing that feature that's responsible for fixing that feature as well. So that strong management services really enables this kind of positive feedback loop in making the service better and better.
Yeah, and I think that that speaks to the last 6 or 7 years from a Microsoft perspective of moving from longer release cycles, engineers who built on premises, and then an operations team that brought it to the cloud, whereas it really is Office 365 first across the services. Right. Engineering, like I said before, that's where they live, that's where they deploy, that's how they do their jobs, and if something happened or is wrong, that's who gets called. And so there's a really great level of accountability from an engineering and investment standpoint on Office 365.
Absolutely. So when we think about that, this highly cohesive set of services, they're also very loosely coupled services as well. We like to separate out all these different functions and have distributed components here as well. This loose coupling, in how we build Office 365, really limits the scope of if there are failures in the system, and of course there will be failures. It's technology, right? And as IT pros, with one thing we can rely on in our jobs is that sometime technology will fail.
Absolutely.
And so this loose coupling really limits the failure scope of that. So we don't want a situation where a bug in the Exchange transport causes SharePoint to crash, or something wrong in Windows Azure Active Directory causes Exchange to crash as well. And so we want to make sure that all these components are isolated and relatively independent, even though they're strongly cohesive set of services as well. We also do things like replicating the data, the directory across all these different services. So if there is a point of failure around identity or something like that, all the services can continue to operate. And so you never see a complete outage with Office 365. You may see isolated blips as we're working up to fix different things, but the system essentially operates and runs on and on as well. So let's take a look at kind of the architecture at some of these services, and we'll start with SharePoint Online. And one of the interesting things about Office 365 is that in the past, as IT pros, we kind of had a specialization, right? We knew the SharePoint architecture really well, but we knew nothing about Exchange. Or we knew Exchange really well, knew nothing about Link, and so on and so on. But Office 365 does force us to have a little bit of generalist knowledge about the architectures of all the different workloads and all the different products we use. So we'll take this next part of this presentation to talk through all these different scenarios as well. So kind of this is the SharePoint 101 situation for perhaps Exchange engineers or something like that.
Yep.
Is that SharePoint is kind of that traditional three-tiered architecture: a database tier, an application tier, and a web tier. And together these things make up what we call a SharePoint farm. The web front end handles that front end traffic. The application services run things like search crawlers and different workflow engines and the central administration to control all the different site collections that are provisioned inside of your SharePoint environment. And then everything is stored in that SQL database with configuration files and content databases, crawl databases, and a whole bunch of other databases inside of SQL. So SharePoint Online is still SharePoint. We had to remember that SharePoint Online is the SharePoint environment. We're just running it at a whole different scale, and we're running it at a very unique architecture and topology because of that as well. So if we think about the SharePoint architecture, start with the database and start with those core building blocks. And of course, Active Directory needs to be there, SQL servers, web front end and application services, and then the federated services that add to those things and those sorts of things as well. So these core components are all run inside a Hyper-V environment. In terms of SharePoint Online, everything is virtualized inside of the data center. So it's only the host machines that are the physical environments, and everything else is a Hyper-V environment. So we can scale really fast, roll out features really fast, move between different hardware sets really fast as well.
So when we think about that IT load, this might be what an IT person has from a SharePoint farm perspective.
Absolutely.
So it is SharePoint, and it is building that on top of the multi-tenant environment. And that's a big point to make, is that this is the constant evolve of SharePoint. But it starts from probably what you have within your environment and what you are currently used to functioning with. And then we start to take that to the cloud scale.
Absolutely. And so all those skills you have around SharePoint and the understanding you have around SharePoint and Exchange don't go away just because you become an Office 365 IT pro. You just need to up-level them a bit and think about the bigger architecture now that we're running hundreds and thousands and even hundreds of millions of users through these systems as well. So when we think about that kind of core building blocks of what makes SharePoint, we actually wrap that up into what we call a stamp. And a stamp is essentially 150 to 250,000 user capacity in Hyper-V servers. And that's kind of our small building block that we think of when we need to scale out more SharePoint Online. So more SharePoint Online, rather than just adding a couple more servers, we actually add capacity for another 250,000 users, and we just stamp it out, hence the name stamp. And so then a network has multiple stamps inside of the data center. We have all of these different stamps operating. Your own tenant will be spread across multiple stamps, so in case there's a failure on one of those stamps, we can continue to operate on other stamps as well. And together, with extra components like Active Directory synchronization, System Center Operations Manager to manage all those different environments, DNS, admin, backup procedures, mail services to send mail out through SharePoint, we wrap that all together, and that becomes essentially what we call as a SharePoint network. And then, of course, every data center will run multiple versions of these networks, spread your data across all of those networks as well, load balance that environment, and of course also have a high availability system with an entire other data center that has that environment operating in it with a similar model as well.
This is one of those 10 to 100 other data centers.
Exactly, right? Yeah. In the same region though.
Yep,
yeah.
In the same region.
And then kind of the other stuff that makes SharePoint Online unique is the stuff that we build around it to manage this infrastructure as well. So even while a web front-end server may look pretty similar to what you run on SharePoint on-premises, it's the stuff that we do to manage that environment. It's the grid manager that manages this grid of networks and stamps, the global directory, the tenant administration, the domain name services, the Azure connections for blob storage and those sorts of things, and also how we use the CDN services that make up what's unique about SharePoint Online. So perhaps to simplify that down, let's take an example of what would happen when we just save a document into SharePoint Online. So this is a pretty kind of simple example that kind of makes the point of where your data will go when you save it. So as a user, I'll save it into SharePoint Online. Essentially at this stage, I'm making one copy of that document. And so if something happens with that one hard drive, I've lost the document, right? So this is kind of the worst SharePoint architecture you could ever have.
Server under your desk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, of course, the next thing you do, logically, RAID 10 across that so you can prevent against that disk failure itself. In Office 365, we also synchronously mirror that to a whole different rack and a whole different stamp. And so you're adding up to 6 different copies of that one document throughout the Office 365 infrastructure. And we asynchronously ship those logs across to a second data center so that your failure scope there is limited to a data center level. So if a data center goes wrong, you still don't lose your data as well. Then, of course, you may get data corruption. You don't want that to be synchronized across all the environments as well. So there are scheduled backups that come into play here. There's asynchronous replication of those scheduled backups across the Office 365 scenario as well. So if there is corruption in that stamp level, we can do point-in-time restores back into that environment to repair the health of that particular set of users running from Office 365.
But to the end user, they drag the document into OneDrive for Business, into their team site.
Exactly.
And we are doing everything else on that.
Yeah, all this is invisible to the users.
Yep.
So if there is kind of a user error,
yep,
and we know it all happens, if there's a user error somewhere in this environment, we need a way for the users to be able to recover that document without having to go back to the scheduled backups or anything like that. That's a pretty costly operation. That's something has really gone wrong if that has to actually happen. And so we have this concept of recycle bin in SharePoint and SharePoint Online. So the user can restore from the recycle bin. The site administrator can restore from the recycle bin if something goes wrong as well. And so we have multiple ways to restore that document without even having to go back to the tape environment as well. And then, of course, there's a client-side cache of that document as well. So inside of Office, Office is doing that asynchronous save up into SharePoint Online and can keep a copy locally. So if there's a problem at the network level with just being able to connect to the data center, maybe the data center is completely healthy, SharePoint Online is completely up, but something's gone wrong with the home internet connection or something like that, you can still get to that document through the client-side cache. So let's talk about Exchange now. And Exchange Online has a very different architecture to SharePoint Online. I started my career as a SharePoint Online guy, and we always used to think about SharePoint farms. Yep. And the one point of advice for anyone that's a SharePoint person is never tell an Exchange guy that it's an Exchange farm. We don't use that term. Exchange farm is a bad term.
Yep. Quick tip of the day.
Exactly. So career-limiting move right there. So in the nature of Exchange, though, is a little bit different. You kind of divide up an Exchange server into a couple of roles. a CAS server, the client access server, and the mailbox server as well. And so the client access server is receiving that traffic, and the mailbox server is storing the mailbox itself. And so we group both of these together into a couple of different things. A CAS is grouped together with a number of different CAS servers, and that provides a CAS array. So it provides failover of that front-end environment there. Then your mailbox servers are grouped together into a database availability group, so that if something goes wrong on one of those servers, they can fall back to another one as well. And then, of course, there's a edge server in play over there, and the edge server kind of controls and routes traffic around to all of those different CAS servers as demand.
So when you think about Exchange architecture, I mean, this would be a typical scenario for our customers.
Yeah, that's right. And this is something you'd run on premises exactly the same way throughout different environments as well.
Yep.
One of the things that we often do, though, to kind of simplify that, from an on-premises point of view, is we do like to combine together those mailbox servers and the CAS array servers as well. Gives you that same level of control, and every CAS server can talk to every mailbox server. But just combining it that way just gives you more bang for your buck in terms of reliability without having to have all those different servers. And most people generally combine these roles together so that you're running your DAG and your CAS array on the same set of servers itself. So then in terms of like how Exchange talks to all of this, and we'll get a little bit deeper here, essentially everything is talking then to the CAS server, and the CAS server is then talking down to that mailbox server, depending on what you're connecting to and what you want to get out of it, you connect there as well. The kind of only real difference there is unified messaging, and unified messaging kind of talks to the CAS server to get the information about that particular mailbox server, and then talks directly to that mailbox server to put in things like voicemail messages in there as well.
So as we think about on-premises architecture, lead times, build-outs, this is what we're building out. And this is what, from an IT pro perspective, this might be what you think about every day when you're going through what your next Exchange architecture might look like.
Exactly. And we're always thinking about scale when we're building out on-prem. Before you even start, it's like, how many users do I have? What's my anticipated growth? What size mailboxes do I want? What's my archive sizes? All those sorts of things come into play when you're building an on-premises Exchange environment. But for Exchange Online, it's already built for you as well. And so essentially, we build out these partitions, and these partitions of CAS arrays and database availability groups. We essentially scale them out really quickly as well. One of the interesting things I think about Exchange Online is that we don't ever patch any of these servers as well. It kind of blows people's minds when we first talk about, what do you mean you don't patch Exchange Online? And the nature is that there's just too many servers to patch. Right? Too many servers to patch, too hard to patch all those servers. And one of the reasons why patching is really hard when you get to this scale is that you introduce this configuration drift. You introduce this nature that one server is just that little bit different to every other server. And if there's just some tweak that's going on, the patch hasn't applied right, or it applied at a really weird time, all of a sudden that server is just a little bit different to everyone else. And you kind of get that butterfly effect or that chaos theory happen when you have hundreds of thousands of servers here. You don't know what's going on, and it's really hard to track down those problems and those sorts of things. So rather than patch, essentially what we do is we just format reinstall those servers. The nature of Exchange is really scalable, that you have that database availability group, that you can take a mailbox, a server out of rotation. It still lives on another 3 or 4 servers inside of Exchange Online. And we can just take it out, stop it accepting traffic, shut it down, reformat it, rebuild it at the new baseline, the new build number, the new patch level, essentially. And then rejoin that into the network, rejoin it into the database availability group, and start transferring that load back onto that server to keep it all up and running really fast as well. And so that whole process is all automated. It allows us to do all of these patches, well, essentially patches or updates, automatically via code, and just roll it out, stamp it out, and make sure everything is a consistent environment. If there's a problem, we can always roll back, and it's very easy to identify through this way if that happens.
Yeah, and I think the key there is automation. So when you're running at the scale of what Exchange Online runs, everything has to be automated, and servers have to tell each other that they're no longer healthy and are going away, or other servers have to vote those out of the group. And I love that story that you tell of servers that are constantly talking to each other, and when one stops responding or is unhealthy, the rest of the servers say,
that's right.
Go away. You're not needed any longer. Yeah.
And it's such a big change for us. And if you've been around in IT for a while, you know, the old discussions we used to have were about what will we name our servers, right? And what's our naming standard? Is it like Star Wars characters, or is it like big cats, or French impressionist painters, or whatever it has to be, right? We always had these weird naming conventions for servers. But in this model where you're just constantly formatting and reinstalling the servers, it's not even a concern anymore, right? It's just numbers.
How long is the GUID you're going to use.
Exactly. Yeah. Just give me something unique.
Yep.
So Office clients, we talked a little bit about those server backend processes and procedures. Jeff, perhaps you can take us through how Office works in this Office 365 environment as well.
Yeah, and I alluded to it a little bit, but from the data center to the CDN to how it's actually delivered, what you see is, from a technology standpoint, allowing end users to capture, to go to an app store, to go to Office 365, and to download and to deploy on their devices. It's a fully different experience. And from an Office 365 Pro Plus, to allow 5 installs from PC or Mac and then across devices, it really changes the game from what we talk about from a deployment perspective. So it starts with the fact that we have Office bits, and the bits sit within our CDN as close as we can get them to you. And that's a big question of, well, is this Office Online? Is this Office? What is this Office 365? It's an install, and it's bits, and it uses click-to-run technology, which helps you be able to install side by side with older versions of Office. We've done the sequencing basically for you from that app feed perspective, and even in some of the latest releases, being able to choose which parts of Office that you can or can't install. But it starts from that CDN, being able to pull that, and you see here on the slides that it's pulling into your software distribution. And that's one of the main key things that I want to make a point of, is that you control the access, the installation, the way you push it out to your end users. So when you're going to an Office 365 Pro Plus deployment, as an IT pro, you have the tools necessary through the Office deployment tool, through the configuration files, to truly control the cloud version of Office. So you bring it into that software distribution method, whichever one you're using, you push it through to those work PCs. From an end user perspective, they see it as a new install. They don't, you can do it without the admin rights. It all is automated from your own technology. The next step is also the kind of bring your own device, or bring your own computer, whatever it is that you're going to bring. Office is now available across multiple different platforms. And from an end user perspective, they can consume it in a way that makes sense to them. Maybe they have a home PC or a work PC that you allow them a little more control over. They can simply go to Office 365, log in, and download and stream those bits directly from the portal. Or they can do it from those app stores that I talked about. So being able to, on a Windows phone, being able to have Office integrated already, being able to look at it across iOS and the various other devices they might use. So it brings control from an IT perspective. Do it through your software deployment, do it through your own architecture. You control the actual updates or the release cadence that you have. So the bits will always be available to you in the latest format as we update them. And then you can set your own schedule as far as how that rolls out to users. And that's a critical component as an IT pro. And that's one of the things we always talk about with Office 365 Pro Plus specifically, is that you have that control. And the method is per your choosing.
That's right. And I really love this model, because in the old days, if you remember back, that you get your software. If you're a large business or something like that, you wanted to package it and push it through System Center, you'd get the actual bits from this obscure volume license service center. And then you had to be like the guy that signed the checks before you got the login into that application. And as the IT admin, you were never the guy that signed the checks to get that software. And so you had to hunt around to find, hey, who signs the checks? Who has the login to this weird portal? And then you find a finance manager or a procurement manager that has forgotten their live ID or whatever they use to log into this system. And now that content delivery network has all the Office bits. Those Office bits are available for anyone to actually download. And we actually have a tool, the Office deployment tool, that you can pull down from TechNet. And what this tool allows you to do is just automate that dragging down those bits, automate that copy down, to somewhere on your file share or on your PC or on your network drive somewhere. And so you can just always have that set up as a scheduled task to just download those bits whenever there's a new bit, and then you can have it always ready on your drive, and you don't need to worry about the VLSC because the activation of the software now is tied to the user rather than the bits itself.
Correct. And you have the control over that, and you can users can activate, deactivate, use it across devices as needed. In that network location or wherever you said, that becomes your gold image. You know, instead of treating Office like an OS install and hey, we're looking at this 3 years from now when we do PC refresh, and it really becomes that application install that happens quickly. It doesn't disrupt previous versions of Office, and you can continue to use it immediately.
So, and that's a very important point. And I think, you know, for everyone out there, Office is an app, right? Office is an app. It's a lot of apps. It's a big app, but it's still an app. It's not an operating system. Don't treat it like an operating system.
Correct.
Because it's nothing like it, right? It's an app. And whereas as you go to other devices like iPads, iPhones, Android devices, Office is an app, and it's just click, click, and then it's there. And the same thing applies to Windows PCs as well. You just click the app, and it's there. Of course, you can control it with software distribution, Active Directory, and all those sorts of things as well. But it is just an app at its point.
And there's a whole MVA session on that.
Curtis and Dean have spent a lot of time, 8 hours, talking about all the different things you can do with it as well.
Absolutely. So what I wanted to switch over now is really service operations.
Sure.
And we've talked about what the data centers look like, how we push it out to our customers, what it actually looks like from the end, like really inside Office 365 from an Exchange and SharePoint perspective. A lot of the big questions are always around control from an IT pro, IT admin is how does Microsoft either help our customers or our partners, or how do we help directly with troubleshooting and getting connectivity and really the role-based access control.
Sure. And role-based access control is a topic we're all familiar with as IT professionals. It's something that we've used a lot in Exchange for the last, 10 years now. I think Exchange 2003, we started to introduce this notion of role-based access control. And the same thing applies to Office 365. We use role-based access control to control who has access to different services inside of Office 365. One of the big differences, though, when you're thinking about like a server traditionally on your network, it's part of your domain, right? So it's part of your domain. You log into it. You know, it may be like corp/service account or something like that, but it essentially lives in the same domain. So as IT pros, if you have the right permissions, you can log directly into that machine itself. But that's not the case with Office 365. In Office 365, our staff, our engineers are on the Microsoft corporate network. The Microsoft corporate network is very different to the Office 365 data center network, and no one has standing permissions on the Office 365 data center network. That's an entirely different, segregated environment. I can't log in just straight into an Office 365 server. You can't do the same. It's a very strict approach to get there. And so what we've done is we've taken this idea of role-based access control, and we've expanded it a little bit for time-based role-based access control. And essentially what happens is that when there's a service request and there's something that actually has to happen on the data center itself that can't be done by code, it can't be an automated process, some of our engineered operations can't just fix and automate the response, and an admin actually needs to log in. They raise a service request, much like you'll raise a service request when you need some sort of change to happen on the service itself. This is important because it's auditable, and it's available by self-service reports. You can actually see some of these requests if it affects your data into the non-owner mailbox access report that you see in Exchange Online. And essentially that admin will request into a system we call Lockbox. And what this Lockbox system does, it assigns these temporary privileges and a temporary user account that it's auditable separately as well. And so for the admin to even get to this stage, essentially we're generating a least privilege account for that user to go and do these tasks that is time-bound. And before they even get that account, they need to go through their background checks, they need to have fingerprinting, security training, and a whole lot of really extensive procedures before you operate on the Office 365 data center network itself. And then that temporary privilege is generated as well. So this is an example of a really interesting way where we've taken that idea of role-based access control and we've expanded it even further, and we've made sure it's auditable and compliant in how we operate this system as well. That kind of talks to our whole Office 365, operations model as well, and how we've slowly evolved it over time as well. Think about the kind of traditional IT environment that we used to all deal with, 10 or 15 years ago. We had a lot of highly skilled and very domain-specific IT pros. Because you needed to understand the environment you were building. You needed to put it all in place. You needed to understand the capacity, and it needed to be static, predictable, change-freeze type of environment. And this is kind of the outsourcing model is still kind of a continuation of this in many ways. That you just kind of change-freeze that environment. You lock it in place. When you lock it in place, all of your documentation stays up to date. You don't have to worry about anything and those sorts of things. And your success was really defined by how skilled you were to actually make those changes on the service you were running yourself. The product team, if the case is Exchange or SharePoint, was totally far away. It was totally disconnected to your environment.
Yep.
You wouldn't ever see them. You kind of raise a support ticket. Maybe over time, it would get fixed through a hotfix or a service pack or something like that. But your day-to-day success depended on you on the ground, understanding everything that was going on in that environment. And over time, we've merged, tried different approaches as well. We had the service IT model. This is kind of the tiered model that many organizations use today, where you have a tier 1 operations support, escalate to tier 2, even tier 3 sometimes, before you finally escalate through Microsoft support, and then escalate through to the product team as well. And that's a great model because it does help you shield your more technical people from a lot of the baseline questions.
Yep.
The have you tried turning it off and on again sort of questions that you have to deal with. But the problem with that is it's just too slow. It's too slow. And when you have an SLA like we have in Office 365, which is 99.9, that allows us essentially 43 minutes of leeway every month. And so if you have to escalate a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 before someone can actually look at the issue, that's going to be way more than 43 minutes to actually resolve that issue. So that service IT model, while great, just isn't fast enough for us to really highly operate an Office 365 service.
Yep.
So then, we initially tried our first kind of foray into the cloud services in the Office team was something called BPOS, or the Business Productivity Online Suite.
Yeah.
I like to call it the big piece of software in the cloud. And that was the first model. We had this direct support model as well. So you had a very lightweight tier 1 operations support. And then at any time, we'd have 10 to 12 engineering teams around the clock monitoring the service 24/7. And when we first put this model in, this initial model of having the engineers do the support themselves and fix it, there was a lot of outcry, right? Because, this time BPOS was based on 2007. We were gearing up for the 2010 waves, Exchange 2010, SharePoint 2010. When there was a problem in the service, we took those engineers off the line. They stopped checking code, they stopped working on the new stuff, they had to go and fix the old stuff. They're working up at 3 a.m. at night. They were complaining that, I'll miss my deadline for these features and those sorts of things. But the weird thing was, a funny thing started to happen after about 6 months of this approach, this direct support model. The code started to get a lot better. The features started to get a lot better. And it actually started to shape what Office 2010, SharePoint 2010, Exchange 2010 became. Because for the first time, we've always heard the pain, we've seen the escalations, we've seen the support issues. But the first time now that we were actually running the service ourselves, we felt the pain, right? We felt that initial pain. We lived the pain. We were woken up at 3 a.m. With automated voice messages to go and fix things in production and those sorts of things as well. And that really helped make those products better and that really positive feedback loop. But of course, there's always room for improvement as well. And so now we've moved on to this notion of engineered operations. And so engineered operations, essentially, while there are direct escalations, we really rely on operations as a separate engineering discipline to really not so much take those support calls, fix the issues, but analyze the issues that the engineering team and the product guys are making, and then automate those things as well. And so then the next time issues occur, we have software-aided processes that can actually automate and even automatically fix those particular actions that happen in the service as well. An example of this is a feature that you've seen in Exchange 2013 called managed availability. Managed availability is this notion that you can have multiple different servers, and essentially those servers form a quorum. And if those servers start to see that one of those servers is acting up, they kind of vote it off the island. And rather than waking the engineer up and and that server causing issues with the whole availability group, essentially the other servers essentially just tell that server to go and crash itself.
Yep.
And you can sit there and wait. And the idea of this is that we have enough capacity, we have enough redundancy in Office 365 that one server doesn't matter, right? A server can break, but the service experience continues. And so when we have that sort of thing happening in Office 365, the whole idea for that is the engineer can sleep in, right? The engineer can get to that blue screen machine at 9 o'clock the next morning. They don't have to be woken up at 3 a.m. because it's not a critical issue. It's not down.
Yep.
People aren't down. The service experience continues. We're just operating with that extra capacity as well. And obviously, the system keeps running.
And then they can get to root cause at a different time.
Exactly, right? Yeah. You got to move on from trying to diagnose root cause. And, traditionally, when it was on-prem, when the escalations finally came to Microsoft, we needed to look at those root causes. We need to understand that root cause straight away. When you're running a service, the priority is getting back up, right? Getting back to uptime is the priority. And with all the logging we have and the 24 or so terabytes of logging we generate every day, then we can start to look at that root cause analysis and reconstruct those issues itself offline when the service is healthy, and we continue on as well. So let's talk a little bit about change management inside of Office 365 now. We've alluded to a couple of these concepts, and we have a whole session based on this later in the course. But a couple of things to understand about change management inside of Office 365 and in the architecture itself. Firstly, the majority of changes that are done on the service are all done through code. This is a true DevOps model. So everything is deploying a new build of a particular service or server or workload. And that really helps us just automate that whole process. It makes sure that configuration drift doesn't happen. And it makes it really easy for us to version different issues. As we roll out a particular build, if we see that it's not so healthy, we can revert that entire build from the system and roll out the next one, essentially. So it's a really easy way rather than having to try and patch and automate the patching of all these different servers at any given time as well. Sometimes there do need to be non-code changes, right? And so those sorts of changes, those sort of, system is down, we need to fix something straight away. Those things need to go through multiple series of reviews. This is still a very strongly protected system. And so there's peer reviews, there's manager reviews, and generally they're implemented via automation, a PowerShell script or something like that, so that we can track that code, so we can roll that code out as well as that. Of course, the implementer in this stage, as I alluded to before, is the engineer responsible for that particular feature in the product. And so the subject matter expert is the person making that fix. And so they always have veto power if they think, hang on, this thing doesn't look, this sort of change may impact something else in the service as well. As great as it is to have all the automation that we have, it's still important that a human is in the loop, right? It's still the old Mark I eyeball. There's that tacit knowledge of the experts we have in the Microsoft engineering team that need to do all these things and understand that code, that system, better than anyone else. When we think about the other changes as well, every change is planned, reviewed well before implementation as well. And as we get and talk about how we roll out these features, essentially they're all made a week in advance. It forces the person that's requesting the change and the person that's implementing the change to make sure it's right before it rolls out into the wider production as well. And it has to go through a series of gates and a series of gated environments before it finally makes its way into the wide world of the production Office 365 environment as well. And of course, if there's a break-fix incident, and of course break-fix incidents will happen in the live site, we have an incident protocol. They're always under the supervision of one of our senior engineering managers. There's an on-call team that's put together to manage and monitor any of these issues that happen as well. So when we think about how these changes actually get deployed into production, firstly, we've got to think about production as the most sacred environment we have inside of Office 365, right? It's where the it's the customer's environment. It's where your data lives. It's where my mailbox lives, your mailbox lives.
Yep.
Perhaps people watching's mailboxes are already in Office 365 as well. So we want to make sure that it's highly protected and highly rigorous as well. If any single change fails any step in the process, the entire build is abandoned. We scrap it. So it's not that you just go back a step, like, all right, do some more testing. It's cut. Start again, start from scratch, start from a new build, and move that package through the environment as well. There's a whole bunch of automated systems that run in this environment. And it's the same pipeline used for the server products as well as the service. And that's an interesting concept for a lot of people to think that, when you see Exchange Service Pack 1, it's that one build tree that we use for Exchange. It lands in Exchange Online, and it lands in Exchange Server eventually as well. So the way to think about Exchange Online is it's kind of n builds ahead of the Exchange Server product at any given time. Obviously, when we roll out something like a service pack or a public update to the clients or the servers themselves, we need to do a whole bunch more testing for different architectures that people may deploy on-prem. There's one architecture in online, and we know that architecture really well, and so we're always ahead of the curve in terms of the build branches in online as well. And so that same pipeline moves through as well, and those changes as we move through that production environment starts with our test accounts, starts with our testing environment. Obviously, the developer checks in that piece of code into the environment. It gets built on their own testing environment. It goes into a check-in validation environment. Then it goes to a post-check-in environment. There's a lot more testing. Every day there's an official build, and that official build gets an official test cycle. And then slowly it starts to creep into our production environments. The first part we call is our service dog food environment. Our service dog food environment is kind of a selection of production users. Microsoft is one of these production users, so we are kind of the guinea pigs ourselves of all of these changes that go through Office 365. And then after that, we slowly start to slice it out into production. This notion of slice in production essentially means we roll it out to a few parts of the environment, and we see if it changes. We monitor the health, we monitor the server capacity, we make sure it doesn't affect uptime, make sure it's not consuming more resources than we expected it to do. And once we see that being safe, we start to roll it out to the next slice, the next slice, the next slice, until it's throughout the production environment. So that sounds like a very long process, but the reality, this is constantly going on. There's constantly builds in flight going through this environment and turning on into production. And the nature of this is that because we're doing this so often, the changes that we are able to make in that short amount of time are relatively small. So most of these changes, the users and even the IT admins don't actually see these changes. In many cases, they're back-end services. And for the big changes, lighting up new features, new capabilities, we generally push out the code first before we light up the user interface to enable that particular feature as well.
I think one thing to remember is we can always pivot on a hotfix or something that's necessary extremely quickly.
That's right.
But then when it comes to actually deploying new features out to production, that's why you might see sometimes we say, oh, hey, Exchange just added this new feature. You may get it in the next few months.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference between how we handle things that are critical hotfix and how we handle things as they roll out.
Yeah. You take an example of like a critical security update for Exchange Online. We can push that out within 24 hours, all the different servers in Exchange Online. And of course, pushing that critical update out basically involves formatting and reinstalling hundreds of thousands of servers, but that can be done in 24 hours. But then things like increasing mailbox size from 25 gigs to 50 gigs, yeah, we can do that at a much slower pace. Make sure it's right, make sure it doesn't impact the rest of the environment, and then gradually ripple that feature out to all the pieces in production as well. So to kind of conclude, this part of this module. Really, Office 365 really supports your business. It's a couple of different ways. It's really secure, really reliable, and extremely efficient environment. It is still controllable. It's still easy for you to secure the environment yourself. And of course, we have a whole lot of compliant processes that we audit through standards like ISO 27001, SSAE 17, FERPA, FISMA, HIPAA, EU model clauses, EU safe harbor rules and regulations as well. So there's a whole bunch of things that we do to make sure that this environment is secure. But it really does help you evolve the business itself. It helps you evolve the business, outsource that commodity focus to stuff that you really don't need to care about anymore, reduce the core platform costs that you have for running things like email and SharePoint, deliver the latest technologies, and get all the stuff that we've spoken about here with no build lead time. We've already built this architecture for you. We're kind of waiting for you to come on board with this environment. So thank you very much. Stay tuned for the next module, getting set up with Office 365 deployment.